Hey guys, Travis Turner, Brick and Loft Realty. Wanted to go over the third party financing addendum, which you're going to use anytime you have a client purchasing a residential property in Texas. This excludes commercial and anything over 4 units. Jump in, let's take a look. Okay, this is the third party financing addendum. This is what you're going to attach anytime your buyer is getting a loan on their property and they're not paying cash. There's different types of third party financing addendums that you may use depending on what type of deal you're using. There's a commercial one that you would use for commercial contracts, buildings, things like that. This is for residential property. So we're going to put our address here on the contract that I explained in the 1 through 4 contract for Texas that you can watch the video on. We used 1111 Main Street, Texas Avenue in Lubbock, Texas, and that's in Lubbock here. So you can fix the address if you need to make it more clean up here. It's going to look better whenever you're not using dummy addresses. So you have to pick the type of financing that your client's rolling with. So here we've got conventional financing, one of the more common note types. So you'd click A, that's conventional financing. If we're using a conventional note, you check if it's a first mortgage loan and the principal amount of, let's just say we were with a $200,000 property before. They're putting 5% down, which would equal about $10,000, or it does equal $10,000, and then minus $200,000, that'd give you $190,000 remaining in a loan. Now, if they're living in the property, chances are they're going to get a 30-year note. This is what you're going to get on their pre-approval letter whenever you get them set up for financing with a lender. But for sake of this contract, they're going to get a 30-year note. Rates right now are sitting about 6%, so we're going to roll with, usually go to a half point to a point above the current interest rate. We're going to do for 30 years, and we're going to do 1% of the loan. A second mortgage loan in the principal amount of blank, this would only be used if somebody was actually pulling a second loan on the same property that they own. So just because you own a primary house and you're buying an investment property, you would still use a first mortgage because it's the first loan on that property. You'd only use a second mortgage if you're pulling a second lien on the property that you already own. Texas Veterans Loan is another option you may use. FHA is one of the most common. This is always going to be 203B. So a section 203B, FHA insured loan of not less than, and let's just say they're putting down for numbers' sake, we're going to use 5%, but typically you'd put 3.5% down here. So this would still be our $190,000. And then we'll do our 30-year loan here, and we're going to do our percentage, and then 30 years. And then not to exceed, this is origination fees, not to exceed 1% of the loan. This is from the buyer estimate of that pre-approval you get. Next loan type is VA guaranteed financing. This is for veterans that have been in the military or served to some degree. They will be able to get a VA guaranteed financing loan. Basically, this means they don't have to put any money down. They get a pretty good interest rate, and it's honestly an awesome program. So if they are able to qualify for it, it's best for them to use it. But for our sake of our property here, we have a $200,000 property. They don't have to put any money down because it's VA. So we're going to have VA checked here. We're going to put for not less than 30 years because they're on a 30-year note. They're not going to exceed 6.5% because they're going to get a little bit better term than most traditional loans, and then we're not going to exceed 1% of the loan. This is almost every time you're going to put 1%. The reason, I'll go back, the reason we put 30 and 30, 30 and 30 is because they're living in the property. This is a 30-year fixed note for the life of the loan. If you're buying an investment property, you may have a 5-year fixed, and you may have a 15-year ammo. So you might have the property financing change or the interest rate change with market after the fixed years. So you would say 7% per annum for the first, let's say it's a 20-year note, so you'd have due in full in 20 years, not to exceed 7% per annum for the first 5 years because it's only fixed for 5 years at 7% of the loan, and then it'll change the market, and this is the full term of 20 years here. That's what that is for. USDA guaranteed financing. This is another note that is offered for property in rural areas. You can check on their website to see if it's compatible or not, but this will basically give buyers the option to move to somewhere with some incentives, such as putting no money down and a good interest rate. Reverse mortgage financing. Honestly, if you have a client trying to do a reverse mortgage, talk them out of it. It's really not a great idea because what it does is it will actually give the owner the equity up front, and then you're going to have to, it'll start building over time. So they're going to take, if they own the property outright, they'll take a $200,000 loan, they'll have the cash, and then every month it's going to stack on top of that for their payments. So now they owe $200,000 plus interest of $1,000, and then every month it's going to build up $1,000. So eventually, whenever they've spent that money and lived on it, they're going to owe $300,000 on a $230,000 property because it's appreciated. So they're going to be upside down $70,000, and they're going to leave that to their kid or their family to deal with, which honestly is not the best way to go because then they have to foreclose. So approval of financing. This is for your buyer to get approved on financing. This is subject to buyer obtaining approval, and we want to typically put this as the same length as our option period, unless for some reason the lender thinks they need more days. If your client's already approved or pre-approved, you can put it's not subject to buyer obtaining approval. FHA VA required provision. This is the section that is the built-in security for FHA and VA loans, which is for the appraisal amount. So whenever the appraisal goes out, the appraiser goes out and appraises the property. This is the value that is built in here that protects your buyer. So if we're buying it for $200,000, we're going to put $200,000 here. So the property has to appraise for $200,000, or you have to renegotiate with the seller. Typically, they'll have to come down in price for your buyer to be able to purchase this property, or they can get their earnest money back. The reason this is so important is because this happens about 2 to 3 weeks into the contract process. So about 60 to 75% of the contract is already over. You're already past your option period, so your buyer pretty much has no outs of the contract. But if the property does not appraise for value, then your client can back out of the deal and get their earnest money back. And this is the third party financing addendum for Texas.